As we continue to focus on our mission, shown here, CAPEN has not only become our end-of-year celebration, but really another opportunity for us to address issues affecting our local Korean American community. This year, we've continually focused on the theme of community, which has become more important in recent years and months as many events have unfolded throughout our country. So how many of you were in attendance at our community empowerment workshop back in October? Anyone? Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you. So just as we focused on one topic of community at that workshop, which was empowerment, tonight we want to focus on another important aspect of community, which is identity. But before we get any further in the program, I'd like to welcome Consulate Kim to the stage for congratulatory remarks on behalf of the Consulate General of Korea. So please welcome Consulate Chunjin Kim.
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 애틀랜타 총영사관의 김충진 영사입니다. 총영사님께서 원래 모시고 되어 있었는데 다른 일정으로 말미암아 제가 대신 대참을 하게 되었습니다. 식사 중이기 때문에 최대한 간략하게 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 지난 10월 20일 날 저희 애틀랜타 총영사관 주관으로 그 다음에 KAC 주최로 인파워먼트라는 주제로 세미나를 개최를 하였습니다. 지금 우리 회장께서도 말씀하셨지만 그 당시에 그 세 파트로 진행된 세미나를 보면서 개인적으로 상당히 많은 감명을 받았습니다. 그 다음에 그 행사를 통해서 KAC의 영향이 어떠하다라는 그런 사실을 확인할 수 있는 계기가 되었고요. 이런 10월 20일 그런 세미나 이후에 또 내년에 KAC에서 상당히 중요한 행사를 준비하고 있습니다. 내셔널 컨벤션 인 애틀랜타 우리 그 전미 대회를 준비하고 있는데요. 저희 총영사관에서도 이런 그 KAC 행사의 중요성을 잘 알고 있기 때문에 최대한 지원할 수 있는 방안을 강구하도록 하겠습니다. 아울러서 지난 세미나 때도 그랬지만 여러 분야의 다양한 네트워크를 통해서 행사를 진행했습니다. 앞으로 KAC가 여러 다양한 기관들을 포괄적으로 포함해서 행사를 진행하고 너희 총영사관에서는 적극적으로 지원 체계를 갖춰서 지원하는 그러한 노력들을 지속적으로 진행해 나가겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Hello everybody. 안녕하세요. My name is Jennifer Chung, and today I will be singing just a couple of songs. And the very first song that I'll be singing is from my most recent album called After All, and we just came out with an acoustic version of it. And this is Justin Cho. And this song is called If Only. And growing up, I am a Korean American, and there's a lot of complexities when it comes to your identity, and I know that's the theme of tonight. But there are also things that society happens to tell you about what you should be or what you shouldn't be. And I hope that this song encourages you, because I know when I was growing up, I've been told a lot of things, but now that I'm older, I feel so much more centered in who I am, and I have peace, and I hope you have that peace as well. This song is called If Only.
Why even bother?
Thank you so much. So my name is Jennifer Chung. On Instagram, you can follow me at Jennifer J. Chung and find out about other performances and music that I come out with. And if you go over there, you can purchase an album. A CD is this thing that people used to listen to, like in their cars. But if you don't listen to CDs, maybe your parents will. But come say hi. I also have some merch. But I thought I'd have my second song, and this is going to be the last song I sing, be a Christmas song that I wrote. And this song is special to me because a lot of times I don't get to spend the holidays with my loved ones. And so this song is about that. And even though you don't get to be with the people you want to be with most on the holidays, you're happy that they're happy. So this song is called Jolly Without Me. Thank you so much for listening.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Michael Park, and I served as past KC president, and I have an opportunity to share some of my personal stories about Mr. Kim Baek-kyu as the person who probably knows him the longest in this room, since I got involved in serving the Korean community about 12 years years ago. His work and track record speak for itself, and I don't want to reiterate, as Caroline said, there's too many things that he's done to label all here at one time tonight. But what really hits me about Mr. Kim and his service to the Korean community is just how much he works with the next generation, and he epitomizes the idea of bridging the generations and the different communities. I haven't seen any other Korean American leader who is so present at so many functions, whether it's with the Jewish community or the African American community or other Asian American communities. And as you saw in the video, he's extremely supportive of the next generation. He's incredibly selfless with his time, and probably most importantly to me, more than just talking a good game and showing up and speaking, he actually leads by example. He always shows up at events. He's always there doing the little things, the stuff that doesn't get in the press and in the media. Most notably this past Tuesday, the runoff election, he was there as a poll monitor, standing outside the cold, making sure that Koreans got their fair access to the polls and realized that they had interpreters available. So it's really just my privilege and great honor to be able to be up here and to present this year's KAC Award to Mr. Kim Baek-kyu. Would you all please stand and join me in congratulations?
Okay, so we are now at the main part of our program. So I'm very excited for the three speakers that are joining us tonight for our special panel. As you may be able to tell, we invited these three guests because we felt that they could share different stories related to the theme of identity. When we first started preparing for this panel earlier this year, there were a few things that we discussed. One is that we're all born with our own ethnicities, but we each form and choose our own identities based on our individual experiences. So if you've never stopped to think about this, I hope that tonight our panel will make you stop and take a moment to think about your own identity. But before we begin, we want to hear from you. So this is the only time I'm going to let you pull out your phones. But we want you to go to this website very, very quickly and enter in this pin. And there you will see our question, which is, which of the following do you most closely identify with? Is it Korean, American, Korean American, or other? And I'll give you a hint, there's no wrong answer. But I'll give you 1 minute, 60 seconds. Okay, go. If anyone has problems, KC board members, can you go around? Are you seeing responses? 10 seconds left. Oh, please click join event, and then you'll see the question. Join event, and then enter the event number. Okay, I think we're seeing responses. Okay, so great. Without any further ado, please join me in welcoming our moderator for tonight, KC board member Eric Kim, and our panelists.
My name is Eric Kim. I serve as a board member of the Korean American Coalition here in Metro Atlanta, and today it is my privilege to be able to moderate this panel for you all. And so, without further ado, actually, before I get into the poll results, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists for you. So, Jongdae Kim is the executive director of the Regeneration Movement, co-founded in 2017 with his wife Grace Choi, with the goal of empowering diverse young generations of refugees and immigrants in the U.S. and beyond to help find their identities and voices to contribute in creating harmonious societies. Regeneration currently offers free SAT, ACT classes and college consultation for refugees and immigrants, and creates space for conversations on social integration and peace building. Jongdae also received a BA in sociology and an MBA both from Emory University. Our second panelist, Jennifer, as you guys have just heard her sing, she's a singer-songwriter, born in Korea, raised in the Bay Area, grew up performing Korean traditional dance, singing at talent shows, jazz bands, musical theater, and started her YouTube journey by posting her first video back in 2007. Now with 134,000 plus subscribers and having garnered more than 38 million views, Jennifer is recognized as one of the pioneers of online music content creators. And last, we have Stephanie Cho. Stephanie Cho is the executive director of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. Originally born in South Korea, Stephanie grew up in Oregon. She has been a community organizer, program director for LGBTQ youth programming, director of training for a national fellowship program, a labor organizer, and an organizational consultant. Before coming to Advancing Justice, she was the director of the Restaurant Opportunities Center in Los Angeles, where she worked to raise industry standards and wages for restaurant workers. So that was the short version of their bios, and clearly we have a very accomplished group up here, and I'm really privileged to moderate this panel for you all. Before the panel, we actually asked each of the panelists to answer the question, what do you identify as? Very open-ended question, because we know kind of their credentials, their bio, who they are, what they do, but behind it, like, what is the identity that drives their work, drives who they are? And so that's kind of where we were trying to get at, and hopefully we'll be able to elaborate more on those themes during this discussion. So before I jump into the first question, let me show you the result of the poll. 75% of people that participated or voted for Korean American, 10% as just Korean, 6% as just American, and 8% as other. So, like Caroline mentioned, there's really no correct answer to this question. It's just kind of a question to really get you thinking about what is my identity, what are the thought processes that come up when you ask yourself that question. And today we really want to highlight some of our panelist stories to delve into the topic of identity. So with that, I'm going to direct my first question towards Jongdae. Jongdae, your identity statement, by the way, these identity statements are written in the program, so I would encourage everyone to reference those as we go along. So, Jongdae, in your identity statement, you describe your experience as colorful. You've had definitely an unconventional route to get to where you are. Can you talk more about your journey of how you eventually ended up here in Atlanta and how all of that journey impacted who you are today?
Sure. First of all, I'm very honored and excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for organizing such a great and wonderful event. You guys really put a lot of work into this. And to answer your questions, I guess, going back to the survey, if I were to vote, I would have probably voted that I identify myself as Korean, but I would also have voted that, I would identify myself as 70% Korean and then 30% Korean American, and I'm going to explain why. So I'm Korean American, currently living in Atlanta, but I'm Korean American because I'm a dual citizen, and I'm a dual citizen because I was born in the United States to Korean parents. And the reason why I was born in the United States was because my grandfather was a political refugee seeking asylum in the United States. So my grandfather was a refugee, and to give you more information, my grandfather is Kim Dae-jung, who served as the 15th president of South Korea. When I was born in the United States, that was when my grandfather back in Korea was sentenced to death. However, the Korean government couldn't execute him right away because of the international pressure. So my grandfather was instead kind of in a compromise sent to the United States. So my dad followed my grandfather, and my mom, who was at the time dating my dad, also made the decision to come to the United States. So they were actually married in the United States, so without the presence of my mom's parents. So that's kind of like the sacrifice that they made. And then that's why I was born in the United States. However, also another interesting thing is that I was just born here. Right after I was born here, the situation got better in Korea, so I moved, like my parents moved back to Korea. So I actually grew up in Korea. But so I grew up in Korea and went through elementary school, but I came back to the United States when I was 14. And that was also because of my grandfather, because then, first I was born here because he was a political refugee, and second, I moved back to the United States because my grandfather in Korea became the president. So because he was a president and having a president grandfather kind of put me on the public spot, and I was even like bullied at school because of that. So my parents wanted to at least send me and my younger brother abroad while he was serving his presidential term. So that's how I came to the United States alone without parents, just with my brother, and I went to the boarding school, and that's how I ended up in Atlanta, where I am.
So for my next question, I'm going to direct it toward you, Jennifer. Jennifer, you mentioned that in your identity statement that the arts and creativity, this is something that's very important to you, which might seem kind of obvious. You're a singer, so maybe that's to be taken for granted, but there does seem to be a more personal element to that. Can you talk about your family's particular immigration experience and how coming up through that experience influenced who you are today?
Yeah, so I actually come from a family of artists. My father was a comedian first, and then he became a singer. And our parents might know him as 정체성대해, and he was known for singing a song called 독도는 우리 땅. And basically there's an island between Korea and Japan, and it's called 독도. And basically he became the spokesperson of having everyone remember that Dokdo Island was originally Korea's, is always Korea's, and to this day he still does political work, and basically his whole life is dedicated to that. He lives in Korea. My mom is a dance teacher. She went to Chungak University, undergrad and graduate, doing modern dance. And I was born in Korea, but when my parents got married, had me, my dad had the opportunity to become a radio DJ in San Francisco. So that's where we moved to San Francisco. And that's where my brother was born. So it's me and my brother as siblings. And when we were younger, my parents didn't work out, so my dad moved to Korea, and my mom raised me, my mom, my brother on our own in the Bay Area. And so we grew up, my brother and I, with my mom who taught Korean traditional dance. So I grew up doing like changuchum, like drum dance and all these things. And so my mom didn't really learn English, so I was the interpreter for everything because all of her students were Koreans. And I know growing up, it felt like kind of a burden for me because I had to grow up faster and be someone who had to communicate with adults and like students all the time. But looking back on it, I'm really grateful for it. And the Korean side of me, because of that, is still very much a part of me. But I also had to learn the American ways very fast. But also, being the daughter of a dance teacher in the Korean community is not like typical at all. And also being the daughter of a singer is not typical at all in the Korean community. So it's been a lot of like navigating what that looks like and still feeling sure of myself. But yeah, I am an American citizen now. I was naturalized through my mother when I was 14. So even though she couldn't speak English that well, she still passed the test. And I'm so grateful for that, and yeah, that's a big part of my identity.
Stephanie, I'm going to direct this one toward you. In your identity statement, you list a lot of different components of your identity. You mentioned that you are a Korean adoptee, as well as a mother, as well as, of course, you're the executive director of a very impactful organization, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Atlanta. Can you talk about the ways in which your journey from actually being born in Korea to, you know, ultimately ending up here in Atlanta has influenced who you are today?
Sure. I was born in Pyeongtaek, and I came over to the U.S. when I was 2 years old with the U.S. military escort. And he had said that I had tried to organize one of the other kids on the plane with me. And so I think thus started my organizing career, was just doing that process. And I think that whole process of coming over to the U.S. as the only person who immigrated, and then having a white family, and unfortunately my white family was not the greatest white family, and so I actually left when I was about 17 years old, and I was able to really hone my Asian American identity. I never had a situation where I looked at myself in the mirror and thought that I was a white person. I always knew that I was Asian. I had that very strong identity right away. Mostly I think because I didn't want to associate myself with the people that were raising me because they were not great. And so I think that has really helped me. And then I also feel really grateful that I was able to have the mindset and I guess the will to know that I wasn't in the greatest situation and to actually leave that situation. And it also just speaks to intuition, and that's part of identity, I feel like, too, is that identity should be something that you create, right? It's something that is physical, but it's also something that's mental, too. And it's something where you have the power to really say, this is what I want, right? And as adults now, it's like, you can say, this is how I want to live my life, and this is actually the best way for me to come across in any kind of situation. And I think my adoptee sort of status, I went back to Korea, I think in like 2009, I think it was, and I found like my Korean family, and they actually had moved to California where I was living. And so I did do the reuniting kind of thing, but you know, there's a lot of things that happen, you know, like over the years, and it's not really that easy to come back to a family where there's so many things that have happened. And so I feel like that experience also kind of brought me back to what is my Korean American identity and all the identities that I'm part of, which is also the queer community, which is also being an activist, which is also being an advocate, and all of those sort of combined together.
Thank you so much, and I really like that point about identity not being something that's given to you per se based on how you look or anything, but it's really something that's a lived-in experience that you have to take and own, and then that really helps you understand yourself and the world around you. So I really appreciate that point. Moving to the next question, I'll just ask it one time and then we'll just kind of go in a row. But how has your unique, like individually unique Korean American experience influenced your career and the work that you do every single day?
So I guess I can say that it was the combination of first my passion, inherent passion from my family about the reconciliation of the Korean Peninsula, and second, my reflection about my identity actually. So like where I stand as a Korean American in this community. So those two things kind of met together to really start the regeneration movement. And to explain a little bit about what regeneration is about, I guess we named it regeneration because we are focused on the young generations of refugees and immigrants, and we want to empower them to find their identities because we live in more and more pluralistic society, and we are seeing more and more diversity, not just in the United States, but just everywhere around in the globe. So we are living in a more diversified society. So in that diversified society, in the U.S. context, I believe refugees and immigrants should be the leaders to take on the role of cultivating the culture of inclusion. So that is kind of like what we are. And so we do two things. First is we empower youth through education. So that's what we do in Clarkston, Georgia, where it is oftentimes called the most diverse square mile in America, where people speak 60 different languages and are from 40 different countries. And we offer SAT education and college mentorship primarily because that is the first thing we saw, the first need that we saw as we were volunteering in Clarkston. We saw many high school students wanting to go to college but didn't really have where to start and didn't really have adequate resources. And in order to be integrated in society, education is probably one of the most powerful tools of empowerment. So we thought that piece is very important. So we started offering free SAT and ACT classes that way. And the second piece is more focused on the young Korean American generations who are living in Atlanta. And I believe that we as overseas Koreans have a role to play for the reconciliation of the Korea that the Koreans living inside cannot do. So we, as young Korean Americans with heart in our home country, we gather together as study groups. So we discuss about peacemaking, reconciliation of the Korean Peninsula, and we just today we actually went on a volunteering trip with our students from Clarkston and also our young regeneration members, and that was very meaningful. So I think, I guess so.
I would say as a Korean American, right now there's a total big wave of Asian Americans being in media, like growing. But when I was younger, there definitely was not. I grew up listening to Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Celine Dion. I was like, oh my gosh, they're so good. I want to be just like them, but I don't look anything like them. And also because my mom was a dance teacher, the thing is my mom majored in modern dance, right? Like she loved contemporary dance. That was her strength. But being a Korean moving to America, they didn't want to learn that from her. They wanted to learn Korean traditional dance from her. So that's where she had to use her strength and things that made her special to capitalize on that and still do the work that she wanted to do. And financially, it was so hard. And I also felt like there is a stigma in the Korean community to be pursuing art. Like whether we see it as something as frivolous or not being a doctor or pursuing things like a lawyer, you know. But art is so important too, because I also do know that the Korean government invested in K-pop, and it is what it is right now because people believe that there's value in art, and Koreans are very talented when it comes to different forms of art. But I think as a Korean American, I think it helped me so much to stand out even on YouTube or performing because people don't expect much from us, to be honest. When I go perform and no one knows who I am, especially ever since I moved to Georgia, if I go on stage, they're kind of intrigued because they're like, oh, this Asian girl is gonna go sing on stage, like I wonder what she'll sound like. And it pushed me though to be as excellent as I could be on a personal level so that I could win them over. Not because I'm a good Korean singer, but because I'm a good singer. So being able to find my own identity as an artist, but owning the fact that yes, I am a Korean American and I have so many different cultural ties to who I am, but my talent is something that I honed, but I get to represent my people. So, yeah.
I think for me, because of the injustices that I saw as an early age, and because I also grew up in a really low-income area, I feel like it was just something that I was part of my identity all along, and I also felt like as one of the only, most of the people that I grew up with, like that were Asian, were Cambodian, Vietnamese, Thai, and so most of them being also refugees as well, and so there wasn't actually a lot of Koreans where I grew up, and I grew up in Oregon, but not like Portland, Oregon, you know, so more rural, and so it was just a really sort of crazy experience, and so I was really one of the only Koreans that I knew. There were a couple other Korean adoptees, you know, that white families had adopted, but that was about it, and so I think all of those experiences really wanted me to seek out a work and justice work, and I didn't really know how to do that. At first I just wanted to be a teacher because I thought I could help, but then I thought maybe a social worker, and then once I started to learn about the principles of organizing and how it can really build power for the communities that you want to serve, that was actually the career that I really wanted to do. So I've done that work with youth, and I did it with labor organizations, and now I get to do it really specifically with the Asian American community in Georgia, which I've really come to love. I wasn't really sure when I moved to Georgia if I was going to like it, because I was coming from LA at the time, where that's a Korean American mecca, right? You can be all kinds of, Korean American that you want to be. It's actually really wonderful in that kind of way. And then coming here, I was nervous, right? But I think I really found like my political home here in a way that I really was really unexpected, but wonderful.
Thank you all. The final question I have isn't directed at anyone, but it's just kind of an open question. What are the challenges that come with interacting or building relationships with other Korean Americans that come from different, lived-in experiences from you? And I guess to elaborate on that point a little bit, I think anytime there are two different types of groups, there's always going to be some level of misunderstanding, some level of disconnect, and it's hard to make that initial connection. With the Korean American community, we're, clearly it's a diverse category by itself as Korean American. How do you, what are the specific challenges of, building those bridges within the Korean American community, and how do we overcome them?
I guess I can start. I guess definitely while we all share the kind of common identity as Koreans ourselves, there's definitely differences between Koreans who grew up in Korea and Korean Americans who grew up in the American context. And I think probably, and definitely there has been some conflicts that I also see, even when I was a student at Emory, there's a KISM, which is primarily, I guess, a FOB organization, which is for Korean international students, and KUSA, which is mainly Korean Americans. So there are two Korean groups within the Emory University. And back when I was in there, I think they have not always been, in terms to each other, but I heard that, it's much different, and they get along much better nowadays. But I think culture is a very definitely important piece to that, and the language as well, because language is not just a communication technique, but language embodies culture, and I think the American Western culture and the Korean Eastern culture have very much difference in terms of when I see the Korean society, there's such emphasis in homogeneity, and I think that's where maybe the source of conflict may come from, because even there's a Korean word that doesn't exist in English, which is 눈치. You guys 눈치, which is this awareness of how people look at me and how I should kind of fit in. And there's a saying in Korean, 모난적이 돌만한다. So it's which means if you're stuck up, you're going to be hammered down. That's what it means. And I think that culture is kind of seeing when I even visit Korea, I really see that how the trends kind of if there's one trend in Korea that is everyone has to all kind of dress the same and speak the same kind of trendy languages and everything. So I saw many Korean Americans who would come to Korea. My Korean American friends would come to Korea, expect to be treated as fellow, just same, Koreans. However, I saw many disappointments because they were discriminated against, and they wouldn't, the Koreans living in Korea wouldn't think of them as fellow Koreans. They would see them as Korean Americans. However, that's kind of the same, that's a social problem as well, because that's not only toward Korean Americans, there's a huge problem of culture of discrimination in Korea, and that applies to North Korean refugees who come to Korea. So the first thing the North Korean refugees do when they come to Korea is to change their accent, to hide where they're from, because they know they're going to be discriminated against. And there's discrimination toward migrant workers as well. So going back to kind of like what we do as regeneration, so we see that can be a huge issue when we talk about the issue of reunification, because reunification is not just, you know, two countries becoming one. It's more of people coming together to form one identity. And you know, already North Korean and South Korean societies are so different, and the people are so different. So there's going to be issues. And before we talk about the reunification, that's why we want to tackle the problem of discrimination first within the South Korean society. So I guess that kind of went a long way, but that's what I see as.
It's like, how do you, like, what are some of the challenges within the Korean American community in interacting with Korean Americans that are different from your, you know, Korean American experience?
I mean, I have a very specific Korean American experience, and I think, but there's actually quite a few adoptees worldwide, right? And so when I was in Korea, it was really great because I was staying at Korea, which is like a Korean adoptee hostel, and I was able to meet all of these adoptees from like around the world, from France, from Belgium, from the Netherlands, and it never really occurred to me how global that sort of transaction happened, right? Like after the Korean War, this is the effects of it, right? And so I think it gave me a really thoughtful and grounding experience about even my experience and what I experienced as a Korean adoptee in the US, because their experiences were even, to be honest, a lot crazier in some ways than mine. And so I think all of that sort of grounded that. And then I would say some of the experiences I have just in general as being somebody who's queer is that just people don't believe me, right? Like they just don't, they're just kind of confused by it, and or, you know, I also have a daughter, and, you know, there's all of those kinds of things, and just the kind of myths and misconceptions that I have about that particular identity, and also being an adoptee as well. I think because it doesn't fit into the homogeneous sort of like blend of what Korea is like, but the reality is that that's not how people are. I mean, there's such diversity, right? And so I think that that's the whole point, right? Is that being Korean American is all these different identities, and actually they're all fine. Like, and it doesn't have to be a thing where this is what it means to be Korean American. There's so many different ways, and that's what's actually beautiful about it.
I would say when I first moved to Georgia 5 years ago, I didn't think that I would have as much of a culture shock as I did. Because in the Bay Area, I actually grew up with a lot of Chinese Americans. And then when I moved to Southern California to go to college, I was surrounded by Korean Americans. I was never a minority, ever in my life. And then I moved to Georgia and I lived in Atlanta. East Atlanta, Midtown, Old Fourth Ward, all those areas. And I was definitely a minority. And because I didn't go to school there, it's not like I could meet friends in that sense. So it was funny because I forced my husband to go to a Korean American church because I just didn't have anything in common with people, like right off the bat. I'm sure if I sat down and talked to somebody and had a real heart-to-heart, we could find something to have in common, but when you're new, you just are a little shy, and I'm shy. So when I went to the Korean American church, even though I didn't know anything about Buford Highway or Johns Creek or anything like that, I pretty much still had an understanding of what your upbringing was probably like. Even though I grew up in an artistic Korean family where it was super unconventional and we were on food stamps and stuff, I still had friends who were Korean, so I knew what you were probably dealing with, and with all the SAT Hagwon stuff and all the struggles that y'all went through growing up, I understood that. So in that sense, like, I really appreciate being able to understand our little unique things that bind us together, even if individually we have our own stories.
So I want to dig into this idea of like the homogeneity, like the Korean as Korean American culture, that culture like inevitably will bleed into whichever Korean American experience you fall into. And you mentioned, at Regeneration, one of your tactics is really to focus on discrimination. What does that actually look like in practice? Or is it just something that we kind of have to endure over time, and maybe one day it'll get better? Is there anything we can do actionably today?
So I guess this kind of ties in. Okay, hello? Okay, this is better. Alright, kind of like zooming out a little bit. So one of the reasons that got us started Regeneration movement was just seeing the trend of the globalization and more diversification, not just in the US but also in Korea, because there are a lot more diversity to, there's a myth of 단일 민족, that just one single ethnicity, and that's not true, and that's going to be even not truer in the future. And the diverse multicultural families growth is rapidly growing. So the composition of the population of Korea is changing, and that's kind of like similar to just all around the globe. And I saw the humanity, I guess this is really broad, but in general, but I saw the humanities response in really generally two ways. First is the exclusion response, and the second way is the embrace response. So we are more prone to, I guess, and more instinctively driven to really, when we see differences with one another, we tend to kind of like choose the exclusion option, and there's fear among us, and it's more comfortable to kind of like stay with around people who look like us and who speak the same language like us and who dress like us. So that's kind of like our tendency, but there's a better choice that kind of like overcomes that kind of human instinct to kind of stay together within ourselves, protect my own little boundary. And the second option is to embrace the diversity and embrace the inclusion, which requires getting out of the comfort zone. It's not always convenient, but just coexistence with differences really requires just getting out of the comfort zone. So one example of regeneration that we can think of. So a few weeks ago we had a study group, and when we have study groups, we always spoke in Korean. But then that single day, there was one Latino American who's really interested in this topic and who came to join us. So all of us spoke in English, and there's it's different when we do that. But and it's a little, I guess, more inconvenient. But that's kind of like our idea that inclusion and coexistence with diversity and differences is not always convenient, but it's the right way. And it's once you do that, you get to include more and more people by just stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit. So that's, I guess, just talking to someone who you never met before and just befriending them. I guess that's kind of like a small practical step that we can take to tackle.
Okay. I think that it's good to step out of your comfort zone, and I also think that most of us are probably more, weirder than we want to admit sometimes, and that actually is real. And so I think that when you connect with people, sometimes it's on the smallest thing that you're interested in, and I think that that's actually really great. And so I don't know. I think connection happens really naturally with people, but sometimes people have their guards up for different reasons and stuff. But I think really there's so many ways to connect with people, and but you have to take the time to really listen to them. And sometimes we get busy, we don't really have the time. And then I would say the other thing is that if you're wanting to get to know other groups of people, just start going to stuff. That's the best way to do it, and because you are truly interested, people will welcome you. right? In the same way that it would be the other way around too. So I think it's just to be curious, because you are a curious person, right? Like just stay curious and want to make that sort of bridge. The other thing is the homogeneous stuff. I mean, I think it's just really hard. But this is true in like other Asian cultures as well, right? And so that's why it's important to really celebrate the differences too, and the similarities, because those are the things that make things more interesting in life anyway, right? Like nobody wants to all wear the same stuff. I mean, maybe, okay, sometimes. But I mean, you know, in general, like, you know, you want something that like, you know, kind of pops, or something that's like a little bit different, because that's what makes you, you.
When I moved to the city and most of my neighbors were Black, it really changed my mindset and everything, because I was always surrounded by Asian people, and especially earlier on when I moved here and the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, it really challenged me to the core. Like, it broke my heart with everything that was happening, and I think that it made me realize how much more as other people of color, like, we have to wake up. But it's so easy for us to go to the Korean American churches because you're shy and you want to just be able to get along with everyone. But I had to make a conscious decision too to leave that Korean American church so that I can get to know other cultures and get to know more people. And I think it just makes the world a better place when we can make the effort to get to know other cultures. Because when we see someone being attacked, it shouldn't matter what they look like or what their background is. We should want to help them, and we won't care about them if we don't see them as a person. And we need to see not only each other as people, but also other cultures. So I think that's one of the greatest things that I've learned in Atlanta, is that there's so much strength in being Koreans, but we can also do more work and be effective when we care about other cultures too. And I think that's where the heart of like Korean Americans will really show.
Wow, thank you. Unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this discussion. I think hopefully everyone in the audience today was able to connect with at least someone's experience, even if not exactly the same. I think there are parts of everyone's experience that you can relate to, but then also maybe one of these individuals that you can relate a little closer to than others. And in that, you know, the hope really is that we can celebrate our differences, but also learn to make those connections outside of our comfort zone. So yeah, thank you all so much. I think that's about all the time we have, so can we please give a round of applause for our panelists?